Is that like a collective or something here?
Oh, Jason, welcome. Jason is pastor in Cooperstown.
Cooperstown. I grew up on Goodyear Lake. So.
Oh, yes. Hello.
Yep.
Sorry, I was getting off of one call and now jumping on this one. So
it's all good.
Well, Deb, the floor is yours.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I'm going to screen share. And while I'm setting that up, I'll say thank you to Larry for inviting me back. I was talking with all of you in 2018. At that point in time, there we go. My, clerk of session and evangelism coordinator came out with me, and we were sharing with you the exciting things that were going on at South Church. So I'm here to give you an update. And for those of you who didn't hear that, you'll get some of that. And in the course of this, I'll also tell you kind of what we're doing now. And hopefully by sharing information, none of us has to reinvent the wheel. But as I say, I'm the pastor at South Presbyterian Church. And it started off as a church much like many of yours, I'm sure, a couple hundred years old. We were located across the street from the University of Rochester's River campus. And I went there in 2008, and somewhere around 2010, we realized we really are going to run out of money. It's not just hyperbole. People are getting older, and they just said, we don't want to be putting our money into a building. The time, the energy, the money we have left, we want to be doing ministry with it. And that was all well and good and exciting and scary. And then we went, oh my God, it's like going into a maze. How do we get through any of this? How do we learn anything? Where do we even start? There weren't a lot of books or things written about that in those days. So we started by doing data collection and educating ourselves. And one of the sources that we used was the Presbyterian Foundation, because they have pretty good up-to-date statistics. And one of the things we learned from them is that of all the congregations across the country, Presbyterian congregations, half of our people attend 12% of our buildings, and the other half are spread over the other 88%. And so when you look at that, it means that you get an average attendance of 88 in Presbyterian churches, and 1/3 of our churches have fewer than 50 members. Now, just let that sink in for a minute. Because if you have a building, unless it's all paid for and you've got some wealthy people, you generally need about 83, 84 people to maintain a building in normal times. And that didn't feel too good to us when we started all this research. And we said, well, how did we get here? And what does this mean? And we said, well, we all grew up with this attractional church model. I'm sure you've heard about it by now. We attract new people so that we can collect their money and get volunteers. And then we create new programs that will attract more people. And it just kind of becomes this vicious sort of circle. And, again, they said, we don't want our money to be going for that. It's got to have more meaning than that. And in the course of our study and our work over about a 3 or 4 year period there, we ran across this example. This is a bridge that you may have seen before. It crosses the Choluteca River in Honduras, and it was built in the 1930s by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And it was built to tie together the village on the left and all of the farmland on the right. And so this became a real regional bridge that was used every day. And the area was thriving as a farming community in Honduras until 1998, when Hurricane Mitch struck the area. And that was a Category 5 hurricane. And believe it or not, that is the same bridge, and the hurricane moved the river. And when I first saw this, I said, oh, it's got to be like the arroyos in our Southwest. I bet the river will move back. Well, no, the river doesn't move back. The bridge is still there, and now it's kind of a bridge to nowhere. And a lot of us began seeing that, well, maybe that's what's happening with the church too, especially as you do more research with, Gen Y, Gen Z, the millennials. They just don't see that the church is very relevant. If the river is the culture and the stream of energy that's going through our communities, then where is the church? It's just kind of stayed there and hasn't done a lot of changing. So we were confronted with the fact that, sometimes we just can't fathom what it is that's happening right in front of us. And I think it's, I hate to use the analogy of the frog in the boiling water. So let's change that to be the hot tub. We're all in the hot tub and the heat gets turned up and feels really good and warm. And then all of a sudden, it's not quite as warm. So we turn it up some more, go a little higher so we can feel that warmth. It just keeps going and going because we've so adjusted to whatever was happening that we can't really tell the forest from the trees anymore when it comes to church development. And so we realized that we needed to think here. We had to be thinking outside of the church building. Now, what I'm going to be telling you happens to be South's journey was to sell the building. We're not advocating that. You don't have to sell your building in order to become more missional or to become more vibrant and alive. But we did. We knew that was part of our call. And so we started looking at, well, how did people do church before there was a church building? And we went back to the first century church and the book of Acts. And, finally we said, well, all right, we may have to think outside the box. And for Presbyterians, that's not always easy to do, but it might mean, gosh, that we have to draw a new box or even rewrite the rules that are used in the box. And I have to say that we were blessed at the time to have a Presbyterian leader in Amy Williams Fowler, who just believed that there are many different ways to be church in the 21st century. And with her help, Committee on Ministry came along and said, sure, we can support you. What do you want to do? And we said, well, we'd like to get rid of the building, but continue to do ministry. And we haven't figured out yet how we're going to do that. But we're going to use the first century church as an example of the 21st century. And gradually we began getting out into the community. We were helped by the fact that there were 3 national articles done on us by the Presbyterian News Service. And we created, literally from the ground up, something that's called the Acts of Faith. And I'll tell you more about those for a couple of minutes. But picture this. I'm in worship one Sunday, and one of the elders who's currently serving on session, and she said, I want to say something to the congregation. I'm like, okay, go ahead. And she stands up there and she says, I just want you to know that I'm not coming to church anymore on Sunday. And the reason is because I think there's better use for my time. As much as I love Deb and I love the sermons and I love the worship and I love all of you, I think that I can't picture Jesus standing out here on Mount Hope Avenue and saying, I've got information for you that's going to rock your world. It's just going to change everything. And I'm only going to give it to you at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning in that building. And I said, well, what are you going to do instead, Barb? And she said, well, I'm going to do, and she listed off all these things in our calendar that she was going to do. I'm going to do, a Tuesday, the Tuesday prayer group, and then I'm going to do choir on Wednesday, and then I'm going to do Bible study over here at Brugger's Bagels on Saturday. We'll set up the Bible study there, and I'm going to lead a book club over at the diner across the street on Friday afternoons. And I said, so you're swapping 4 hours for 1? And she said, well, yeah, but it's out there. It's out where the people are. And that was kind of what prompted the people at South Presbyterian to figure out, oh, maybe we should try this. Maybe this is God leading us. And an act of faith then has evolved to become defined as an organic grassroots ministry growing out of the needs and interests of the people. So what that means is that it's relational and it's all about relationship. And when we say it's organic, it means we don't sit down at the church and say, I think they could use a Bible study in that part of the city. You go and you get to know people and you really invest your time just hanging out with them, doing stuff with them. Maybe you talk about God, but maybe you don't, because we figure that by virtue of our baptisms, whoever comes in contact with us is going to bump up against Jesus because we're grafted onto him. So let's take that literally and really believe that and say, all right, well, they're going to bump up against Jesus through us. We need to be there for them to bump up against. And he wasn't always talking about God. He lived a life, and maybe that's what we should be doing. So it's an organic thing. It grows out of their needs and their interests. And over time, as it evolved, there were 3 precepts that seemed to develop. I'll show you at the end of this where you can get all this information. But the first is that acts of faith are designed to exist outside the church building. You can own your church building, and maybe you'll get some people who will come to activities there. But I know some rural churches become the community center of where you are. And that's a great thing. And I encourage you to use that. But there are an awful lot of places where people are reluctant to even come into the building. And so we said, all right, let's go where the folks are. We'll go to diners, we'll go to barbershops, we'll go to coffee shops. In our case, we went to the psych center, senior living communities, any place where people gather. And that's where we started building relationships, and we found out what they needed and what they wanted. The second precept can be a little threatening to clergy because it is that no act of faith should be pastor dependent. It needs to be member led. Pastors are involved. We resource, we teach, we encourage. There are times when I'll go in, especially if something's new, and I may be involved for the first 6 or 8 weeks as I'm training up leadership, but it has a heavy component in leadership development. And then the third is that this is really a struggle, is that every act of faith is equal and they're all on a par. And for those of us who grew up, in the church, it's like Sunday morning was the be all and end all, but that's kind of our bias, that Sunday worship is the most important thing. Some people worship better if they're doing a walking meditation group out, in nature, and hymns and all that. It just doesn't resonate for them. So realizing that what I might think of as church is Sunday worship, somebody else might say, it's not speaking to me. Please don't make me call that church. How about if the book group that is interdenominational and where we're meeting and talking and praying together and working together, maybe that's worship for me. So, we kind of have had to re-examine what our own biases are. But I keep coming back to, that quote from Ephesians that the role of the minister is to equip the saints for the work of ministry. So ideally, I think I should be working myself out of a job. Hasn't happened yet, but I keep aspiring. An act of faith might be overtly religious, like a Bible study held in a bagel store, or not, like a community choir, where maybe they don't sing any religious songs at all, but they do a lot of songs about peace or about understanding other cultures. Because, as I mentioned, this model believes we don't have to be talking about God all the time. By being there, people will bump up against Jesus. And to start an act of faith, we really try to keep it simple. So you can do this in your church. It takes 2 people, and we don't require them to be part of the church. They could be community members who have a shared need or interest, and they really want to build community through this group. And so the session agrees automatically, pretty much, to sponsor them for 3 months. Usually there's no expense, or if there is, it's a little expense about, duplicating flyers or something like that. But then at the end of every 3 months, we look at things and evaluate it and figure out, yes, this is something that should continue. No, if not, I'll tell you how we do that in just a minute. But what we're really doing during this pilot period is lending sort of an institutional identity to whatever's going on. And so here are the results. Here's how we know that it works. These are facts and figures going back to 2015. I don't have 2020s and figures or 21s worked into this yet. In 2015, South had 35 members and 16 acts of faith. Go over and compare that. On the other end, I have to move you on my screen so that I can see all of this. Okay. So that in 2019, we had 54 members. Not bad. growing 4 years, almost, 50% increase there. And we had 20 acts of faith. Now, I said that we figured out if acts of faith should continue or not. The only criteria we use is, does it have energy and excitement? We don't count numbers. I don't care if something's only got two people participating in it every week. If there's energy and excitement, we think the Holy Spirit is present and we should pay attention to it. It might be energy and excitement from the leaders, or it could be the participants. It could even just be the people in the community watching it. So here's an example. We had dinner and a movie as an act of faith for quite a few years. I think it will resume after COVID. For many of those years, it was just 2 or 3 people, the same 2 or 3 people. And there was a little diner, and it was across the street from a local cinema that played, like the second run movies. So every week they'd go to dinner at the diner, and then they'd walk across the street and they'd take in whatever movie was playing. That was the thing. You had to go to whatever movie it was. And some of them, they didn't want to go, but they went. And then the following week they would discuss, where was God in that? Where did your spirit get touched in that movie? And they'd have these great discussions over the meal the next week. This went on for a year and a half before finally one of the waitresses said to the folks, what are you doing here? How come we see you every week? And this gal looks up and says, well, we're a church group. And she says, a what? And she said, yeah, church group. Well, then you go to the movies? Yeah, we go, and then we come back and we talk about it. You're a church group? And she had never heard of such a thing. So all of a sudden, information spread like wildfire through this diner, through everybody who came in there for like the next 2 or 3 weeks. Oh yeah, they're the church ladies. So then they go across, and doesn't the same kind of thing happen with the people working behind the concession stand, just about the same period of time? And one of our women ended up being on the board of directors for this not-for-profit theater, because she said, well, it's all about community. It's a lot like coming to church, and you get people who are sitting in the same pews all the time. And the guy jokingly says, well, yeah, where do you sit? And she goes, we're in row P for Presbyterian. And he looked at her, he said, you're really serious? And she says, yeah, this is one of our ministries. So I think when we're looking at energy and excitement, we can't just worry about numbers, and we can't just worry about the people that we see, who we see as being involved. Although once a year, I ask people for the numbers. I say, how many different people have you had in your act of faith at any point this year? Give me names. And then I will also say, and how many times did you meet? And what was the average attendance that you had each time? Those are the only, that's the only data that we collect. But as a result, here's how we know that it's kind of successful. As a result, over those years, when we had 16 members, we had 572 different individuals who participated in at least one of our acts of faith at least once during the year. And you track that line along, in 2019, we had just under 6,000 different people whose lives were touched by us being out in the community. And we would never get 6,000 people into our building to come through that building for anything. I don't care if it's, a major voting center, not going to be 6,000 people. And when you add on top of that, those who come back time and time again, what we consider to be our contacts, well, then we went from 9,000, just under 10,000 contacts in 2015 to over 25,000 different contacts. 25,000 times people were bumping up against Jesus through us, just because we were out in the community and not expecting them to come to us, but we expected to go to them. So let me bring this into the last part of this presentation. We were told by as the word seemed to spread around the country through these 3 articles that were done by the Presbyterian News Service, we began getting calls, and word of mouth was spreading. And so more and more people wanted to learn about the acts of faith, or how is South doing this? What do you mean the church has left the building? And so our attorney came to us and said, we need to create a not-for-profit, because God forbid somebody should sue you and say that, they don't like what you're saying. We need to protect the church, which we totally agreed. So a couple of years ago, we formed Firebird Spirit, which is it is an active faith of South Church, but it is a 501c3 recognized charity in the state of New York. And we are chartered to assist churches and or not-for-profits in transition and transformation. And so now I have people on the board and on the Firebird team from all around the country in different areas. We've got finance people, and we've got IT people, and we've got marketing people, and former executive presbyters and stuff like that. And these are the folks we've worked with just in the last, well, since 2017. Presbyterian Genesee Valley, of course, that's where we are. But this last year, we're working now with two churches, one that's going to combine with an Episcopal church and continue as an art center, another that's probably going to sell its building but wants to continue its ministries using, both of them are going to use the Acts of Faith model. In West Brunswick, New Jersey, they're not selling their building, but they want to get more missional. So we've done a couple presentations with them. We're going to be doing some work shepherding them through the Acts of Faith model. Of course, we came and talked with you in the Utica Presbytery. Right before, a month before COVID hit, we were invited to New Jersey, where we spoke to 5 different presbyteries at once, 17 or 18 different churches involved. And from that grew, down in the lower right-hand corner, the working with the churches in Trenton. There, it's very interesting. Churches surrounding the city really want to work together to do ministry in the city, and they're going to be using the Acts of Faith model. So in their presbytery, they created an Acts of Faith working group. San Fernando Presbytery out in LA heard about us, and it didn't make sense for us to try to go out there. So they came to us. They brought 4 of them came to us and spent 4 days with us, including a videographer. So when you saw some of the videos, those were created in conjunction with San Fernando because they wanted to absorb everything that we were doing and take it back there so they could use it in LA. We've been in conversation with let's see, I'll forget his name now. I don't remember. Brad Monroe, who's exec of Grand Canyon and De Cristo. And those are the presbyteries along the Mexican border. He really feels strongly that the Acts of Faith model is something that can work in the border ministries well. So we had planned on doing a keynote with them, and then COVID hit. But the most interesting for me right now is this thing in Elizabeth, New Jersey. We were down there in November to do an all-day workshop with Second Presbyterian Church, which is also linked to First Presbyterian and Siloam Peace Fellowship, and this Restore Ministries, which helps young people graduating from high school to either go into college or vocational work. From there, we figured out that the Acts of Faith is a great idea, and it's a great name if you're in a faith-based group, but that if you're in a secular group like a not-for-profit, the word faith can get in the way. And so we do exactly the same. It's still exactly the same model, but we call it Acts of Hope when we're dealing with non-church-based groups. And this is kind of where we are right now in our young development of Firebird Spirit. I wanted to tell you that we've moved now to the point where instead of just coming and talking about the future of the church, what we do is we lead small group discussions with the people who are gathered for us. Depending on what they want to do, we may do simulations with them about how to start Acts of Faith. We've developed a practical how-to checklist that starts 3 months before your AOF opens and then continues, and how do you do evaluations, and then of course leadership development and training modules, and again drawing on this team of people we have from around the country who are part of Firebird Spirit. I'm mindful of our time, so I don't want to run over too much, but I wanted to tell you about Sonia as one example, who was a person who came to us, had been churched, I think, as a Baptist as a child, started coming to us because she was a waitress. And she always said to me, if you ever get a church, I'm coming to where you are. And so she started coming to South. And and then she got these ideas for different ministries where she lived in a high rise. And she's disabled in the sense that she almost died in her 40s. Now she's in her early 50s. So she collects disability, but she's able to do some work. And she went from a person who would not even read a prayer that was printed and lead people in prayer to, over about a 4 or 5 year period of going through our leadership development program, is now capable of constructing wonderful worship that's meaningful and theologically sound, and leading people in prayer and spontaneously praying and providing pastoral care. I mean, this woman should be in ministry, and maybe God is not finished with her yet, and maybe she'll end up there. But she is just a product of this, and now she's our clerk of session. So it's been an amazing journey watching her. The other story to tell you about is this Restore Ministries that we were working with in Elizabeth. These are kids who are the student leaders, and they are ages 17 to 22, I think. And while we were there for the day, we gave them a lot of theoretical stuff and then the hands-on stuff. They left there that day having absolutely created 2 new acts of faith for their group to use, both of them involving, this is so great, support around mental illness concerns as kids are graduating and moving on either into college or vocational work. I'm just really impressed with that group. Our mission is taken from Matthew 28:19. It's go out and train everyone you meet, far and near, in my way of life. That's the message version of the Great Commission. And we realize there are 3 parts to that: to go and train and to live. And so what we've done is to develop those 3 levels of offerings. The go level is the day 1 or 2 workshop. Obviously, you spend more time on the same stuff if it's a 2-day, but all of that can be in a 1-day workshop. The train level expands that and allows us to come back for 5 days, not usually consecutively, but throughout a year or 2 years, to develop the coursework that is most meaningful to you and that your people need. And in New Jersey, they had a consortium of churches that brought us in to work with them. It wasn't just a one church deal, but there's several churches that we're working with. And then, of course, the final level can be ongoing, and that's a 12-month contract to work with our people as, whatever areas are needed. So that's it. And right now, South Church is limping along, as we all are during COVID. I think the biggest challenge that we're facing right now is finances, of course, but it's not energy and excitement. And just since we went back into full, in-person worship, when we started that back in August, all of a sudden now we had 4 new acts of faith that people had created. So it's an amazing thing to watch it grow and to figure out how to do our ministry with that being the case, with no money, but a lot of energy and excitement, and the ministry is just thriving. So one of the things I was talking with a colleague about this morning, and then I'm happy to take your questions, is how do we define sustainability? Most of us have been brought up to say it's financially sustainable. Maybe that's not. Maybe that shouldn't be the definition of sustainability. Maybe it should be something around mission work, or how did the first century church define sustainability? I don't know, but I'm excited every day to try to figure it out some more. So that's kind of the update on South and Firebird Spirit, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I see something in the chat here, which I hadn't been able to see. Yes, I'll be happy to make the whole slideshow available. I'll send Larry a link to our Google Drive. What else? It was a lot, I know, crammed into a little amount of time because I wanted to honor the time. I kind of went over a little bit, sorry.
I'm a little bit curious. I know you said that in 2014 you sold the former church building. It appears to me in the videos that you're meeting in a churchy looking building, both exterior and interior shots. I'm just curious
Yeah.
about where you're meeting, how, that part of your church life happens.
Okay. Let me do pre-COVID because right now, when COVID hit, we had 4 worshiping communities. 3 of them are recognized as part of the 1,001 New Worshiping Communities Initiative. But we have 4. One of them has ceased and a new one has started that will always be virtual and online by their choice. And there are people from around the country who are now part of this online evening prayer group every Thursday night. Go figure. We worship on different days in different places, no churches. The one that you probably saw that looks a little churchy is in a senior living center in just a regular card playing recreational room. But we have figured out how to make it feel more worshipful, and that's with banners. And we have the original communion table from South Church. And so we were able to take that with us. It was, we'd call it Meals on Wheels, but it was kind of like watching the Ark of the Covenant be moved. Actually, it was very moving when the guys came and they lifted that thing and carried it out of the church and into this new location. It was very spiritually profound. But we found that through banners and other artwork, we can make it feel very worshipful. And that's probably what you saw. So one is there. Another is in a high rise. That's the one that Sonia started in the movie room of the high rise. And that's in one of the videos. A third one is in another group setting. It's an assisted living facility and just a regular old room, game room. And the others were at in the psychiatric center. We especially had a very meaningful ministry pre-COVID with the forensic unit, the regional forensic unit. And I will tell you that there's nothing like working with the people who are court placed there, the ones who are either have been arrested and you're trying to stabilize them so that they can stand trial, or they have been found not guilty by reason of mental defect. And they are there for a long time. We're talking anywhere from 8 to 25 years. And they're an amazing, the theological questions that they ask are just truly, truly inspiring and amazing and thought-provoking. So those have been our worshiping communities.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for watching the videos.
I think I have one more to go.
Okay.
They're very engaging.
Thanks. I do want to show you one other thing or 2 other things before we go, but Victor, you look like you're
Yeah.
question.
Well, I'm in the situation where our church is within a 2-year process towards dissolution, and we talked a lot about church without walls. We didn't really get far enough to be looking at frameworks in which to do that. But the resistance is just tremendous. So could you talk about you went through study and you had that grace-filled moment with the elders standing up and speaking, but it couldn't have been gravy to get where you are today.
It wasn't gravy. I didn't come to hawk a book, but we have written one. And I'll show you where you can get it. But when we were going through this, there was nothing to help me, nothing.
Yeah.
And so we wrote it. We wrote the book and it's called The Church Has Left the Building. And the first half of every chapter is what we did that year. But the second half of every chapter is pastor's thoughts and theological reflection on what we were doing. And then there's an addendum to each chapter because I used to be a school teacher. So it's kind of values clarification. It's a workbook for churches to follow this. A Korean Korean churches in New Jersey have been poring over this, and they'll call me up and ask for help on one thing or another. I know what you're talking about. The foundation talks about a 3-year, what do they call it? Runway. Churches have a 3-year runway to really start the process until they can successfully navigate getting rid of property. Yeah. I don't know what it was about South. I have to say it was divine intervention, because a lot of it came from the congregation. This was not the Deb show ever, and I was reluctant to do some of the things that they were saying. No, we have to try this, and so we really have grown together in our faith. The one thing that I will say, and I think this comes through the videos, is that they have been so moved and their spirit has been so deepened. They never, ever want to own a building again. It just takes too much time and effort, and they just want to be devoted to ministry and sharing the good news. And I don't know about you, but even at Colgate Rochester, where we were all about social gospel, nobody prepared me to deal with a group of people that was ready to put everything on the line and just go out and live their faith and share it. So that becomes contagious. And many people are not there, and many churches are not there. And, I think we just have to honor it and try to provide the most grace-filled ending that we can.
Thank you. Yeah. Wow. Thank you.
Let me just share one other thing before we go, if I can. Where is it? It's my screen here. No. Well, maybe I don't have it open. Just a minute, because I had to reboot right before all of this. But I wanted to show you where you can find more information, where you can order the book if you're so inclined. And that is at our, here it comes, that's at our website. And there are other things that are there too. Here we go. It's at southpc.org. And if you go to southpc.org, you'll see up at the top here is welcome. And if you click on welcome, that's where you get, hello, there we go. That's where you get all of the information about the Acts of Faith and Firebird Spirit. And as you go down through here, this is probably where you were looking at the videos there, Mark. There are different videos here that you can see, and some of them were made by the people from San Fernando. But if you scroll all the way down, here's the book, and you can order it right there, and we'll send it out to you. Another thing, though, from the website, so you know how to get there. I'm going to scroll up, even though it'll make you dizzy. If you come up to the ribbon and you go to Acts of Faith, and you come down to current Acts of Faith, we're pretty good at keeping this current. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger here. These are current as of now, just to give you an idea, because many of you, I'm sure you are doing things like this, and all that it means to make it an act of faith is kind of changing your headset a little around the theology of grassroots organic ministry. And back on that page where we just were, where you have all the videos, there's also a link to download the white paper, which includes all the theological explanations for what we do. But these are the current Acts of Faith. We have Cup of the Bible. That's all. You can tell the ones that are Zoom, they say Zoom on them, but that's a Bible study. We've got dinner and a movie that's going to resume. Evening prayer is online. Fellowship of Faith is mostly in person. That's the one at St. John's Meadows with all that you saw. Food for Thought. This had been in the diner for 10 years. We started this 10 years ago. Now they've been online during the pandemic. Since we've come back, people have started this Living Bread ministry, which is somebody makes a loaf of bread every week and brings it to Fellowship of Faith, so that somebody, whether they're part of the fellowship or not, just somebody who needs to, well, as they say, needs to have a hug in their tummy. They need to know that somebody is thinking of them and that things are going to be okay, that they're not alone. And so they give them this, no strings attached. They may not be Christian. They're not part of our group necessarily, but it's some sort of living bread because Jesus is the living bread. We are a Matthew 25 church, and once a month still, our people go over to a local soup kitchen and work with the homeless. We have the New Life Food Cupboard, which is open 3 mornings a month. Ring for Joy started just since August. A woman came to me and she said, do you know any church that's not using their bells? I used to conduct a bell choir and I'm really missing that. And I think it would be fun to just kind of open it up and let anybody come in and ring, because now that we can be together, they all need to be. I'm looking at her and I said, well, we have 3 octaves of bells that we haven't used for like 3 years or 5 years. And she goes, you're kidding. They played at Christmas. So that's a new thing. And she's brought in some people who don't come to church, but they want to ring bells. Slow Sheep is our walking meditation group. Sing for Joy, most people would call that church choir, but our Sing for Joy group meets in a senior living community. That's where they rehearse. And so the first half hour of their rehearsal every week is a community sing-along. People just come, anything they want to sing. Our guy will say, oh, sure, let's play that. And then half an hour in, he'll say, well, we're going to switch over to some 3 and 4 part music now. If you want to stay, you're welcome to. You don't have to read. There's no audition. You can sing and never sing on Sunday if you want. But if you want to sing and come sing at Sunday worship, we'd love to have you. It has become like its own thing. Sophia Speaks is new. One of my seniors, an 84-year-old gal, came and said, I know I'm supposed to be feeling closer to God because I'm getting ready to die, but I'm just not feeling it. Do you think you could do some kind of senior spirituality group? And I said, no, but I think that you could, and I'll be happy to resource you. I said, I'll do the first 6 weeks. You take it from there. And she said, all right, that sounds good. So there are 8 women, and they wanted to have it be a closed group. And now we're going to go on and start a second group. I did my 6 weeks, which was why I couldn't be here sooner. And now they're running it on their own. Go figure. Lovejoy Fellowship, that's whenever we can get together. A group that started online is Water from the Well. They wanted more in-depth Bible studies. So now I'm doing 2 Bible studies a week online. But I've got, in that one, I got a gal from Utah, and I got a gal from Florida, and I got a couple who live in Ithaca. I mean, it's crazy. I'm thinking, where are these people? How do they know this? So these are the things that we can all be doing. And this DVD ministry, when we went to doing online services, we decided that we were going to do YouTube videos because not all of our people, didn't want to have to worry about bulletins, and this way we can put it on the text on the screen and all that and have a little more control over it. It means we have to do it a week early, but we cope. But then we found out and figured out how we got people who don't have access to the internet. So what are we going to do with them? And we were able to get grant from the Presbyterian to buy DVD duplicators and some portable DVD players and a bunch of things. So we took what we were putting on the YouTube channel and burn them into DVDs and take those around now. So between online worship and in-person worship and DVD worship, we have about 120 people worshiping with our service every week. Crazy. I don't know where this is going, but they can't afford to pay me a salary, so I'm going to halftime. So it is what it is, and we do what we do, and it's kind of amazing to me. But South is not. I don't want to say we're not special. We are deeply loved by the Spirit. However, what we're doing is no different from what any of us could be doing, right? There's nothing that's too hard about any of this stuff. A walking meditation group, going to the movies, going out to dinner, making DVDs, taking them to our shut-ins. We can be doing that. We have to think outside the box. And in any way that we can help, we're happy to help. Because we're all in this together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else you can think of before I take my leave?
Yeah, just thank you so much. I think what I've always appreciated about you is just your infectious enthusiasm.
Thanks. Middle school music teacher. But I thank you so much for inviting us back, for caring enough to know what's going on with us. And, we covet your prayers always. We'll keep you posted. And if you can think of a way that we can help, let us know, because that's really what we're here for. It's the good part of the connectional system.
Oh, we will, young Skywalker.
All right. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much, and everybody.
All right.
Bye
Thank
for now.
you.
God,
Thank you,
God
friends.
bless.
The Lord be with you.
And also,
Also with you.
Bye now.
bye-bye.